Hello, and welcome to Traverse. My name is Franziska Eri. I'm a theatre and opera director talking to you from the Ram Theatre in Budapest, Hungary. Every week, I'll be talking to different industry professionals from all over the world about their careers, the shifts and adjustments they had to make during this pandemic, and their hopes and dreams for the future. This is Traverse. What's next for our industry?
My guest today is Matt Swoboda. Matt is the founder of Notch, a visual creation tool that works entirely in real time. Notch technology powers visuals for artists such as U2, Beyoncé and Ed Sheeran, and have been used for events such as Eurovision, the Brits, and numerous music festivals worldwide. For the past 20 years, Matt has worked at the forefront of real-time graphics development, with numerous awards to his credit. Today we talk about how the pandemic has changed the way artists create content and what that means for Notch.
Hi, Matt. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. Just in a theatre. Where are you right now?
You're so lucky to be in the theatre. I've been in the theatre in like over a year now. I'm at home. I've been at home, working from home since March. So this is nothing new.
Are you in London right now?
Just outside London.
Right. So you guys are still very much in lockdown mode, is that right?
We are currently in hard lockdown. We're not meant to go out except for like exercise and essential shopping or something like that. It's still really strict.
You said you haven't been to theatre in a year. I'm presuming you haven't done many other things either.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like the beginning of last year, if we start the beginning of 2020, we had all these big plans like everybody else, like so much stuff was scheduled. And then we could feel this, you feel the virus, that the sort of, you hear about it coming in and then everyone's wondering whether it's just gonna just not really affect you or just go away. And we had a big party like just before, like just in March, we had a big party. And then the next week, office closed, everything shut down. It's incredibly strange. I mean, it's strange for us, but it was even stranger for all of the community and the users, because we saw, we had customers who lost all of their projects within like 2 days. It's crazy. So then I think everyone, like everybody else, just went into sort of adapting, trying to figure out what we're going to do and how to get around this. And for a while, it was just like immediately responding, trying to figure out how we could help the community out. And then we start to live with it and try and come up with plans and change focus a little bit and see if we can find the benefits out of the situation and so on.
And are there any benefits that you found?
So it's strange for me as the owner of a software company and essentially a developer, like a programmer, because in a way, like sitting at home by my computer and typing on the computer it's actually quite good in a way. Like I used to spend quite a lot of time traveling and going out to meetings, going out to shows and doing all these kind of things, and now not doing that has probably given a new focus on like getting on with things, I guess. Our year, typically we have all these trade shows and events and projects and stuff happening. I think it's very easy to feel like you're getting a lot of things done, whereas you're not really doing that much. So it's actually, we enable us to do more long-term work, like really work and focus on getting product done, which is kind of good as well. I suppose as a company, we were lucky in some ways that half the company was working remote anyway. So a lot of us were working at home anyway. So it wasn't the worst adaptation that, I know some companies, it would have been more of a shock.
We will talk about your company in a second, but I actually wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, about your background and how you actually got to the point of founding Notch.
So I worked in video games for a very long time, since like early 2000s. So I was working on my first games console I worked on was PlayStation 2. That seriously ages me, I'm afraid.
Nope, I play PlayStation 2. That's not that old.
It's like, yeah, so it started in 2001. Got a few games out, a couple of games out on PS2. And then I moved to Sony Computer Entertainment, and I was there for quite a long, like 9 years, I think. I was in the R&D team, so I was working on like pre-console production, like working on the hardware before it came out and doing various graphics research things. And the one thing I did, which is actually famous, which you actually see on PlayStation, is on the PlayStation 4, I did the background wave. So I was working in video games, and I was kind of bored as well because I wasn't really playing video games or anything like that. I was just kind of into graphics by then, and I was kind of doing some other stuff on the side, like doing some interactive installations and demos and videos and kind of things as well. And I guess I got interested in the idea, I've always been interested in the idea of using real-time graphics technology to make things that are not games. Like to make graphics. Because I was working with other artists and they were using like traditional means. And it was so slow to make stuff. Like it's so painful, and you have these huge files, and like everything is just filling up your hard disk, and it's like, this is too painful to be like, there must be a different way of doing this. So it was kind of became interesting to try and use all the technology we were using just to make games and adapt it to something else. So I was doing that. I made some software, like basic version of the software. And then I got involved with D3 as they were then, like D3 Technology, Disguise as they are now. I met Ash as the founder. We started working together a bit on some projects. The first thing we did together was like Eurovision 2014. And then it kind of spiraled out from there very quickly. I did some stuff for the Ed Sheeran World Tour in 2014 and a couple of other things. And then suddenly they realized that there was actually a demand for this. Like people actually wanted this stuff. I think they've been kind of looking for it in the live events industry. And so it just kind of spiraled really quickly from there.
So as someone who is not great with the tech side of things, please explain this to me. So it is essentially a tool that allows you to do real-time graphics. So in a way, if I directed a show, let's say, and I had some sort of digital set, I wanted to change things, I would be able to without any additional rendering time. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And also you can make it responsive to like a live performer. You can make stuff that follows a performer and or like follows the cameras or uses audio, all these kind of things. You can just make that, very easily. I think it's been around for a long time, actually. I mean, people have been doing this for a long time, like 20 years or so. But I think what's made it different with recently is that the quality's got a lot better. So I think before, like real-time stuff was always kind of considered this ugly kind of crappy version of graphics that you used a bit with video. And now actually, I think it's got to almost to the level where it's kind of acceptably on par. So you don't need to, so you can make a choice now to use it. You can do it because you want to. It feels like less of a compromise now.
Where can it still go? Does it have other areas where you think it could be used?
If you had a choice between doing things like slowly and heavily or doing them quickly, wouldn't you always choose to do it quicker? See what I mean?
I would, but I also think I would make it the most accessible as well, if that makes sense. So someone who's a technophobe like me, I'm going to stop saying that. I'm doing an interview on Zoom. I'm not a technophobe, but I'm not trained in graphics. And there is an assumption when we talk about specifically opera directing, that when you're using projections or when you're using a digital, some sort of layer, it is a bit of a cop-out. And I think that is a huge stigma that I think we kind of have to untangle as an industry.
It seems like theatre and like opera now, like so much stuff that used to be done with like scenic is done with video now. Like it all used to be done with physical sets. I think that, like I heard someone told me that the reason it's done, particularly in like New York, like Broadway theaters. It's like you can do so much in a small space. If you don't have this huge huge stage, you can do a lot of video in a small space. So it's actually quite practical. But yeah, and obviously it has its complications. It's meant that the whole industry's have to learn a new way of doing things. But I think the big things that have happened over the last few years, I mean, partly because of Notch and partly because of other technologies as well, is the quality's gone up. And the complexity and accessibility, the complexity's gone down and the accessibility's gone up. When we started with Notch, like if people were really scared of doing real-time stuff in shows. Like I remember when we were doing Eurovision, like they were really quite concerned about the whole thing. Like, what if it blows up? What if it doesn't do exactly what we thought? What if it's, you know, which is understandable. But now, I think that worry has gone a lot. Like people are much more their video is completely prevalent now, and real-time video is getting more and more. So making it more accessible and viable for any show, and also getting the cost down, getting the sort of the technology to be standardized. So it's just, you know, you can just buy off the shelf and load it in, and getting the number of artists able to use it. So, you know, you can go to your usual video people and they can come and do it. It's all made it much more accessible.
And you mentioned space, which I'm actually very interested in, that a smaller space can have more possibilities now. Would that be possible in people's homes? We are, you know, kind of exploring what theater and entertainment can be now, and we're all kind of stuck at home. So is there some sort of plan to make it so accessible that even an audience member can recreate some sort of theatrical event?
I mean, it's interesting, because that's a question of whether you'd be talking about something interactive or whether you'd be improving something that people watch. You see what I mean?
I guess I'm interested in both.
Because VR is obviously this kind of, in theory, VR is going to be amazing and fix all these things, right? Because you could just pop in a headset and you'd be in anywhere. But in practice, like, it hasn't really happened. Like, it's just too expensive. It's too difficult to set up. It's really hard to make stuff for it. So it never really kicked off. But in theory, VR will be the thing. But I think in practice, maybe the sweet spot is like stuff on phones. You move your phone around, like you can look around the space. Like, the thing with people at home is like, you have to, there's always this kind of compromise between the best thing you can do, like the best thing you can do for someone at home who has a really great computer and all this hardware, and then the thing that regular people, that normal people actually have. And I think when it comes to entertainment, I far rather bias it towards the regular people, like what most people can see, make something that most people can experience. I think the interactivity thing is a whole other thing though. Zoom-based watching entertainment on streaming and Zoom and so on. Kind of over this now. I think the problem with a lot of experiences. Sorry if I'm derailing future questions, by the way.
No.
So so much stuff's moved online, right? Last year, out of necessity. But I think that a lot of things, what they've tried to do is just take an experience that they really wanted to make for their theater or their concert or whatever, and just try and dump it onto a stream. And you kind of you're competing with everything then. Like if you're trying to do a stream for someone at home, you're competing with their own attention spans. You're competing with their ability to load up last year's thing on YouTube and watch a stream of it. You're competing with like the next video on their Facebook feeds. You're competing with everything else, right? It's not like you're in a theater or a venue where you've locked people in, and even then they're still on their bloody phones. But at least if you've got people in a venue and you've got an atmosphere and they've got a huge sound system and you've got this big experience and you've got a whole crowd all focusing on it and giving you this collective experience, it offers something. But when you're at home and you're just watching a stream, you're kind of thinking, what's the point? Unless, sorry, I feel like I'm dissing half the industry by now, but then I think the way to look at it is like, what can you do to this to make it worth watching when you're at home, to make it worth, like, you want to make it more interactive, like make it worth being a part of this. Yeah, and it has to be something different, because the ways that work in a theater don't work on a desktop.
And do you have an answer for that,
No,
or
no,
some
I'm
sort
afraid
of
I don't.
idea?
Not really. Well, I've got a few ideas. I mean, there's a few things that have gone past. Actually, there was an off the shelf, like an example of a real project. Last year, there's these guys. They did a streamed DJ sets from a venue, right? So, what they did was they had the venue and they had the DJ in it, and they had a full lighting rig and everything. And then you could watch that, so you could watch the video at home, right? But in your browser, you could go and take control of the lighting rig. So everyone's in a queue, and like when you put yourself in the queue, and then when you come around, you've got 2 minutes where you're in control of the whole stream's lighting. Like, obviously it was limited enough so you couldn't screw it up. But the basic, that's a really great idea, because the audience in a real venue, when you go to a show, you're part of the experience in some way. Maybe not as much as you imagine sometimes, but you being in the audience, you're feeding back to the performers. You can hear everyone around you. You can see everyone around you. Often when you're going to a concert or something, you spend a lot of time looking at the people around you, not at the show. And I think you don't get any sense of that on the streams, but finding ways to enable people to be collectively together, even when they're not, even when they don't know each other.
What about not trying to make it collective? What about a personalized experience? Are there any projects veering towards that?
There was a VR experience by Satori Studio that we were involved with for a bit. So their concept was to do a theatre performance for one person. There was only one audience member, and they're in a VR headset. But so you go into the venue, you go into the space, like into the theatre, put their headset on, and then there's actually live musicians and live performers going around and talking to you, as well as the video. So it really messes with you, because you see like a camera capture in your headset, but the person's really there, and you can hear them talking. So obviously it's quite hard to scale. It's a very personalized, that's the ultimate personalized experience. And there must be a way to scale. There are ways to change the content so that the person at home sees something different than the next guy.
I think more and more people chase that sort of experience. We've talked about it on this podcast before, but there seems to be a lot of individualism happening, and I think that's what video games are as well, isn't it? It's just going into a world and having control of it, and it's your personalized journey. Social media kind of caters to that as well. So maybe our communal experiences are becoming a bit more individual.
Yeah, but I think you've got to balance that with like, I can go on Spotify and listen to any song I want, but sometimes I want to be told what to listen to, or made to listen to a certain thing. There's something to be said for a curated narrative experience in show form where you don't have that much control direction, where you're actually taking on a journey.
I never thought of it that way. A curator could be the new big role, I guess, in the art forms. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your career, or Notch's career path. If there was any time a big, challenge that you had to overcome that really sticks out for you.
And the most challenging time probably is the last year. You've got to say, because we're slightly insulated from, we don't do projects. We support people who do projects. But when all of those people's projects disappeared, suddenly there's a moment where you're thinking, wow, what are we actually, how is this going to keep going? What are we completely sunk? If there's no revenue for a year, what do you do? It didn't actually come down to that, which is great. It really quickly realized that the community is completely adaptable. A lot of people adapted. You've got a lot of clever people who found other ways to apply themselves. And Also, I think we found like Notch is more adaptable than maybe we feared. People used it in different ways. They took it. There's a lot of ways that people are using it that have nothing to do with live entertainment. I mean, there was a lucky that changed direction. Like Notch was never really. It wasn't designed for live events originally. It was designed for like making graphics. It was designed for making video. Really, it was almost by luck that the concert thing kind of happened. It was like I never really thought of us using Notch to apply camera effects to anything, right? Like it was because nowadays Notch is heavily used on tours to do effects on live camera feeds. So people want to spice up their feed of the band by putting effects on and stuff. But that was never what it was designed for. It was I was brought in by Treatment Studio. When I was like doing freelance stuff. I wasn't even for Notch. It was just like I was just doing some freelance graphics, and they brought me in to help out on the Ed Sheeran tour. And then while I was in there, they were doing some pre-programming of the show in the next room. And I went in and they were using some other system to do like basic effects on cameras. And I was like, man, I reckon we could do that. And we did some quick tests and it's like, wow, this is great. And we ended up doing like half the tour was done with this. And it was just kind of a very opportunistic, like it was a very opportune moment. After Ed Sheeran went out, a load of other bands saw it, and like Coldplay wanted it. So they called up and they wanted it on their show. Sharon Osbourne wanted it on Aussie, so that could snowball, and then it just snowballed from that. But it was all just from that one lucky moment. You could look at it as dumb luck. I'm quite happy to do that. But the other way you can look at it, actually, I think, is that one of the things I really try to achieve with Notch is that you want to make a system where you don't necessarily know how it's going to be used. You want to make something that allows people to use it in their own way.
That's actually was going to be my next question, is if average people like me wanted to use Notch, do you have any sort of outreach or training? Where can people learn how to use this?
There's so this is another happy outcome of the pandemic, was that because we used to do a lot of in-person training courses, but now at the start of the pandemic we moved everything online. Like we got our lead training guy Armin to record all of it, like for hours. It's like hours and hours of him talking into his computer. So that's all online. So now there you can do like I can't remember how long they're, probably like 20 hours worth of courses online. But the basic training is all free. So you can just go on and start, see where you get. And that gets you going quite well. There's also like a lot of a big community, a lot of tutorials. There's people started to do their own tutorials as well. So it's a growing resource.
You mentioned streaming, and this is something I keep thinking about, is that once the pandemic is over, whatever that means, maybe in a couple of years when we forget about Corona, many of us still believe that streaming and digital will be working alongside traditional theater going. Do you see any sort of future in that, or any way that could be a bit more interesting than just a camera, as you mentioned?
If we're talking about virtual production in general, like moving productions onto streamed virtual format, there are some things that really makes sense for. Like if you're doing, say you've got like a corporate, say you're running a trade show, you have a corporate conference about like, I don't know, dental equipment or something. I imagine there's an awful lot of dentists out there who'd rather just sit at home and watch that on their computer than actually go somewhere and sit in a room and be told about dental equipment. So like, it makes real sense that they move that. And that one thing the pandemic's probably done is made people think, why am I bothering to go to all these events that I don't really want to go to? So it makes a lot of sense for that. But then other things like streamed concerts is a different deal. There is these kind of crossover events with video games, like Travis Scott did a performance in Fortnite, this kind of thing, right? And they got loads and loads of viewers. But I think that there's a couple of major problems with it at the moment. Like, firstly, monetization. Like, how do you monetize streamed events? No one wants to pay for it because everyone's so used to everything being free. No one wants to actually pay for streamed events. That Travis Scott Fortnite thing, I think they probably did really well. I think it probably worked out heavily because of Epic sponsoring and because of like other like things like the shoes being sponsored, and this it's all side monetization, right? It's not people buying tickets. And it also they did really well from that going to a new audience, like streaming reaching new audiences. This makes a lot of sense. Like there's a load of 12-year-old gamers who cannot travel to Travis Scott concerts who saw him for the first time, and his Spotify streams went through the roof. I guess that applies as well to, there's people in parts of the world who find it very difficult to see a lot of bands. So streaming actually, it kind of equalizes that. But it's hard to say that it replaces, like, does Travis Scott say, I'm not going to tour anymore, I'm just going to run gigs in Fortnite? I mean, he might, but it's a different experience. Touring, there's a collective experience, there's being together with people, there's the atmosphere, everything about it makes it worth going to a gig. And that's why it's worth spending £40, euros, whatever, on a ticket. Whereas to get people to pay for anything for stream is a real struggle. I think a lot of artists have really struggled with it. So they're having to monetize in other ways. There's a lot of like Facebook fan groups where they try and get a little bit of money out of their fans to be part of a Facebook, their community group, giving people access to sort of behind the scenes stuff and things, trying to monetize. Theatre's kind of an interesting crossover though. I think theatre has a slightly different audience, like a higher brow audience who might pay for the cultural experience. But it's still going to be hard to you couldn't sell tickets for the same amount that you'd sell, the theatre ticket for. So it's going to be very difficult.
It's true, but then again, you could have a show that has, is in 100-seater and 1,000 people go and see it. So I think the amount of people, if the tech can take it and it's robust enough, I think streaming has actually opened up, as you said, like to new horizons. There are new audiences who can be reached through that way.
Yeah, that's definitely the advantage. But I guess, so how many people, it'll be interesting to get the numbers of how many people watched the sort of 100-seat theatre show online. See what I mean?
Yeah.
Like whether there was 100,000 people watching or whether it was actually more like just a couple of hundred. Like it's really hard to know the balance. Because I think when you move stuff into a stream, you're then competing with filmed media, you're competing with TV and film and stuff that was specifically shot and produced in that way to look good. And a lot of live stuff doesn't really translate that well. You have to change it to make it work. Like going back to the sort of personalized experience you were talking about before, when VR was coming out and people were doing these like 360 camera shot captures of gigs where there's a camera on stage and you can look around, you can like look at Bono, like stand next to Bono and stuff like that. I was always thinking, man, that's the last thing I want to do in my VR headset. I don't care about that at all. What I'd actually want to do is to experience the music, but with a show produced for me in the VR sense. Like use the visual and make a really strong visual show. Take advantage of the media, like the fact that in a VR headset you're locked in and you can't escape or check your phone or whatever, and take advantage of that medium. I think I think people haven't quite cracked it with streaming yet. They haven't quite found the reason yet.
I wanted to look a little bit towards the future, and if you, if anything were possible, where would you like to see Notch in 10 years?
10 years, which is, can I say I'll be retired by then? Is that okay?
You can, if that's what you want.
I don't know. I mean, so I think this year is going to be a really big year for us. Notch has been in theory in beta for like forever. So this year our aim is to release 1.0, the first full finished version of Notch, if anything's ever finished. So at the end of the year, we've got a deadline to try and hit sometime this year, we're going to push out the big new release of Notch. The benefit of the pandemic has been like being able to step back and kind of reimagine everything, because you don't have this immediate pressure. There were still projects going on, but the volume had dropped so much that the support levels and stuff changed, that you could actually step back and like think about long-term development efforts you're going to do. So we reimagined some areas of it quite a lot, like new UI, a lot of new capabilities, and a lot higher quality, and some rendering features, like really trying to take it to a step up and also make it a lot more usable for people coming in. So really hope that's going to change. It's be a really big step forward and grow it to a lot of new audiences as well. That's our big push at the moment. After that, you know, it's maybe who can possibly, 10 years seems like a lifetime away, like technology wise. Like, who's to say if we'll even be using like desktop computers at that point? I think one area of technology that is definitely it's been an R&D project. We've done R&D on it already, and it's likely to be continuing over the next year. Is like running content on the cloud. So I think one of the sort of challenges for the industry when it comes to video is just the sheer amount of hardware you have to have. Like you need a lot of kit on site, and it limits accessibility as well. Like everyone needs this the hardware in order to be able to use it. So we've been looking at, or we've done some good experiments with running Notch in the cloud and then streaming. So you don't, all of a sudden now you just need a good internet connection to Amazon, and you don't have to deal with, you can run it, you can see stuff on your phone. Like you don't need the same sort of physical setup.
And does that not compromise the stability of it?
So yeah and no. I mean, obviously, if someone cuts your internet cable, it's going to have quite a serious impact on stability. But what it does do is, like, if you're running in cloud, you've got hot redundancy really easily. Like you can just spin up another server, or you can have a couple spin there all the time. If one goes down, you just spin up another one. Like instances can just be there all the time, ready to spin up. And you can remote monitor it. Like you don't need to be on site looking at your box. You just need to do some cloud management. It has some benefits. I think for a certain set of projects, like interactive installations in corporate environments, it really does have a lot of useful potential benefits. And I think it also gives people new ways to get their work out there. If everything's locked together with the hardware and the system, the barrier to getting stuff, to making a project is quite big. It's expensive. So the more you can cut that down, the better. But I guess if you're talking about theatre and concerts, it's going to be further away because of the latency, and there's other issues there.
Yeah, by latency you mean the lag, is that right?
Yeah, the lag, exactly. Particularly if you've got a live performer on camera and you're trying to do effects on that really needs to be quick.
Maybe in 10 years, you never know.
Well, that's it. Like 5G is coming apparently. So
yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you about 5G, although I don't know how important it is to you. But I heard that it is going to minimize the lag, maybe down to milliseconds, and that's going to make a huge difference. I think with classical music, when you're following a conductor, maybe everyone will be allowed to be remote.
Yeah, and what it might open up is because like internet in venues has always been a massive problem, like so maybe this will help matters. The 5G thing, what it might open up is being able to get video into more places by streaming. Like if I want to put a video on all the bus stops, like you go to a bus stop and you should see like a video wall with some animation of when the next bus is coming with effects on it. I don't know, like tailored ads or something. But you could never run hardware sufficiently powerfully enough to do that. But if it's streamed down, you could just in a small box receiving streaming. Or maybe we can do with lower latency. We can have motion capture performers in one place and seeing the results in the theatre in another place. I guess we don't know what things it's going to change. We just have to make everything as much as possible available and see what people will do with it.
I've heard of a couple of rehearsals where directors were actually in a completely different country, but because of Corona, they didn't have the chance to actually travel into the venue. So they were just projected onto a big projector and gave directions that way. And the kind of fragility of the connection is makes such a huge difference in situations like that. Do you think the fact that we're now working from home, we're working remotely, is going to change the way we look at making work in the industry as well?
Yeah, I think so. You know, interestingly, talking about like COVID, and I can't remember which project it was. It might have been Katy Perry's Idol appearance. I can't remember. It was one of the big sort of virtual production notch projects. It was a nice project, but they were like super limited in the venue. They could only have really small number of people, like tiny number of people, because like if the artist was there, they could only have like 4 people in the room or something crazy. It was really limited. So a lot of people were working remote, as you said. Like maybe people have proved to themselves that you don't all need to be on site all the time. You can work remotely. Like I know there's some teams doing virtual production. They have just a bunch of feeds being streamed back to them. They're in the UK while someone else is in Los Angeles, while they're doing the filming in Los Angeles. This is quite positive because, I mean, probably know, like theatre, touring, the rehearsals can be quite brutal, long, 1 or 2 months in a venue, having loads of people there. It's late nights, it's a grind. And maybe having the ability to do it remotely, it enables people who wouldn't otherwise be able to do this work, be able to like be involved. It means that not everyone could drop their lives and go away for a month. But if they can work from home, it's a lot more viable, right? Like a lot of the tour rehearsals is show programming, it's video and all that kind of thing. And often the artist doesn't come in till quite late. Like it's a month of video people sitting in a room of video walls. And then like 3 days of the artist rolling in and checking it, saying, okay. It's not always like that, they really vary. But in that kind of process, it's just people sat in the rehearsal, in the sort of changing rooms of a hockey stadium with their computers making video for days and days on end. And like, does that all need to be done in person? Couldn't you do that remotely? Because obviously a lot of people and companies and productions holding on to the old way of doing things of, we all fly here, we all work these hours and stuff, and maybe like flexibility could be, if it's allowed, could be a good thing. It'd be hard to roll it back once people have taken advantage of it.
Yes, it's kind of what people are saying about the home office. Now that people know that they actually don't have to live in London to work at their London workplace, they might never actually go back. London
at the moment is like a disaster, right? Because everything's shut down, so all the things that made it great just aren't allowed to happen. But going forward, we're looking at what we're going to do with our office. Like we used to go to our office every day in central London, and everyone would commute in and spend loads of money and time on the trains, and then go to the office and then like annoy each other and then get lunch and then annoy each other some more and go home. And like maybe you actually don't need to do that every day. It changes the point of having an office. Maybe you have an office to just have it for parties. You don't need it for work anymore. You just have it for parties and meetings.
Just office parties.
That's exactly why we have our office now, I think, just for office parties.
You make life sound so mundane when you describe, going to commuting and working and then coming back. But in a way, like when you describe the grind, I think I would really miss the grind if I didn't have to be there in person. Something about getting into that mindset. I don't know if technology can ever replace that.
I think for like the guys, for me and people in our company, I think you want to have a mix, right? So when you've got work to sit and do, you do that from home. But when you've got work when you need to see people, you go to the office. Like it enables the split. It enables the choice to be there about when you go in and when you don't. I mean, there's loads of things like, there's no after work drinks right now. Or when they are, they're on Zoom, and it just gets really out of hand. It's really stupid.
Can you remember from your career a point where tech has let you down?
Tech rarely lets you down. It's normally people using tech that lets you down. Is that reasonable? God, that's a complex question. There's a few ways I could answer that question. I could answer it by telling you the story of the one show I ever did that crashed.
Yes, please.
Oh God.
If you're happy to share it.
Oh God, is this really fit for podcast though? I don't know if this is like podcast appropriate, to be honest. Maybe this is like one I have to tell you later, not on the podcast because it might get sued. The has tech ever let me down? I don't know. I don't think tech lets me down. I think it's always like planning and preparation and other people's use of tech that always seems to be the thing that goes wrong. There's times when the tech when you've overestimated what you'll be able to do with tech, and then you've got yourself in a little bit of a hole and you've had to scramble to find solutions around it. Like, you get a really amazing 3D camera that doesn't quite give you the results you thought it was going to give, and everything's really noisy and you just can't use it. And then you have to have a plan B. These kind of situations have come up. But I think it normally comes down to like bad planning or pressures. It's hard to blame the tech. The tech does what it does. It's a very programmer's answer there. It's not the tech's fault. It's the people's fault.
Yeah, that's amazing, because when I ask this question from people, they always say it's the tech's fault. So it's very interesting. So I'm in the RAM Theater in Budapest, and I always ask every guest, if you were here and if anything were possible, what would you like to make in this venue?
Does it have an audience or not?
You can have an audience if you want. It seats 650.
I like mixing. The thing that I really like about, the thing that really interests me about live, like one of the things I really enjoy is like messing with people, where people don't really know how it's possible, whether it's possible or if it's really happening, and those kind of things. Achieving those kind of things is really, really enjoyable. So trying to do something that kind of warped people's perception of what's going on somehow. So having actors for everything going through, being filmed and then warped. So what you weren't really sure what you were seeing as an audience member. You weren't really sure if you were seeing something live or how it was twisting, or like people coming out of invisible, materializing on stage and all these kind of things. Like making people, making something that feels a bit like magic. That would be what I want to do. Like fake mirrors, there are actually video walls, there are those kind of things. Like, can you make something where the audience is never quite sure what they're seeing? Like virtual production and virtual sets are an interesting thing, right? Why, if you could make anything, why would you just recreate your set? Why wouldn't you just do something really wild? Like, you should go to the limits of what can be done, I think.
Well, thank you. That's a really good answer. And thank you so much for coming on, Traverse. It's been fascinating to listen to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
This was Traverse. Thank you so much for joining us, and join us next time to see what's next for our industry.